Hi there, everybody. My name is Kate, and welcome to my channel, Trenergy Awakens Naturally. Let's talk about blaming. Blaming goes with a lot of other fun words like shaming and naming, fingering the perp, and gaming. As far as I'm concerned, it turns into the Hunger Games when we start blaming other people for what they've done to us. Please don't misunderstand me right off the jump. People are responsible for what they do to other people. We are responsible for what we do to other people. For those out there that teach the victim mentality and say, we're not victims, we are most certainly victims. We have all been victimized on some level or not. It's a matter of how long are we going to stay stuck rotating in the blaming, shaming, gaming, and naming part before we can hop out of that to get to the surgical part of this, where we take our emotions of what happened out of the equation and go hop over to the other side where it's just an evaluation of the scene. Let's take a look at what happened. What can I see about this without getting all involved in the emotions? And that can be very, very tricky, very, very difficult, and quite complicated. So, if it's something that you're interested in, try picking something that's, low profile, that's not likely to get you really inflamed, just to get kind of used to the concept. Because if we pick the most volatile things in us and try to get non-emotional about it, well, that can run into problems with we're going to just close off our emotions. And that's how we got here in the first place, is people make very unconscious and very dark decisions and take harmful action against others because they are asleep, they are unconscious, they're dark, they're whatever it is, that the unenlightened, whatever word you want to use, I really could care less. It's just a matter that if we stay in the blaming portion, that's kind of a short-term thing. Naming and blaming should really be finger the perp, ID that bugger, don't make it land, for hours and hours, days and days, and weeks and on to eternity, right? It's a name who it is, name what it is, ID it, finger the perp, and say, that's it, that's who did that. Cool. Now we can go on to the accountability and the responsibility part, because if we stay back over there and she did this, she did that, he did this, blah, 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 we're stuck in a very terminal loop over here. And that's just a stupid loop of old programming, because that's what most of us learned in codependency and in unhealthy relationships and porous boundaries with people, where we aren't really taught to stand up for ourselves or how to recover from other people's unconsciousness and attacks upon us. We can get stuck in that victim mentality where we are absolutely victimized. It's just a matter that we don't have to stay there. And the sooner we reach justification and balance in our own heart and our own soul, we'll not care about staying over there blaming, because blaming is kind of a waste of time. We already know who did it. We already know who done it, unless we don't. And most of us, in our personal relationships, I'm not talking about crimes, actual crimes that are being solved in courts. I'm talking about in our emotional stuff, that most of us are pretty quick to be able to say, he did that, she did that, and it's their fault. And there are people that are accountable. So how do we deal with not staying over there, re-identifying the same problem or the same perpetrator over and over and over again? It does keep us in that victim mentality, where we then start piling up more perpetrators who migrate to that stuff. It becomes predator feast, like, oh, cool, this is the Apex games, I love it. And they will continue to help you redo that cycle over and over and over and over and over again. So how do we hop out of it? Well, pick something small, whatever it is. Somebody flipped you off on the road, or somebody said something nasty in the grocery store, and we feel like, that's just terrible. Okay, well, let's take that and say, that person, she's so. It's essentially when we're characterizing another person, their entire being, based on their behavior, we are blaming them, as opposed to looking at them and saying, excuse me, ma'am, are you aware that, that's rude or whatever? If I personally wouldn't probably approach a stranger in a grocery store, maybe somebody else would. If we're growing our strength in this and taking our first little baby steps, maybe we would. But perhaps we would say, are you aware that offends people, that you have offended me? Now, most people aren't going to do that. They're going to stick with the blaming and that lady, she's the one that made me so mad and blah, 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 right? That's where the ing words get us. Ing words, blaming, shaming, gaming, naming, all of those things, those are human doing words. If we can get into the human being part of us, where take accountability, ask someone to take accountability rather than assessing their character, assessing who and what they are. Because someone acting, offhand in a grocery store, rude, etc., isn't necessarily their entire character. It could be, and it could be their entire behavior is always salty and rude like that. It's still not their being. We are human beings. We have a core in us that's all, in that juicy good stuff. And a lot of people just think I'm, foo-foo sweet, and I am. However, I'm surgical about knowing when people's behavior isn't even close to that. And I can identify it now after years of getting that stuff wrong, because I can always see the good in people. We sure can. And if they're exhibiting nothing of that, or they've got it so walled off and shut down that it's impossible to easily and readily see that, then we're going to start assessing who and what they are to their very core, just rotten to the core, based on their salty, rude behavior. And it's not fair. It's fair to make the assessment that, rude doesn't work and no thank you. It's not rude to just cast people aside and say they're worthless because they flipped me off in the grocery store. That old lady must be crazy. She must be this. And she made me have a bad day because. That's really getting into the emotion, a lot of emotion, and assigning it to other people that, what are they actually accountable for? Offending me. Cool. Okay. Well, that's very different than making a character assessment of a whole woman based on one action. And again, I'm not talking about stepping that into, major archetypal figures, Carl Jung archetypes exactly, until you really get surgical with it at a much less emotionally charged level. But eventually that's where we head. That when we can look at people that have harmed us, they've caused us severe pain, they've caused us minor pain, they've caused us pain, they've caused us assault, they've caused us to be off balance, question ourselves and question our human beingness, and started asking us about the character of our human doingness, that can really be a challenge. So how do we get to that place where we can do that with others, is to more easily do it with ourselves. When we're out there blaming and shaming and naming and doing all those ing words, identifying, fingering the perp, when we're doing all of those things, there's more than likely always a chance for us to take inventory about, why am I out here putting out somebody else's responsibility for my mood? Why am I casting that upon someone else? To have that ability, to have that control. Why am I not taking personal accountability and responsibility for my mood and not allowing some old bag in a grocery store to ruin my whole day? Or anybody step it up into the archetypal, step it up into those power roles that we feel, kind of intimidated by. At any level that you can take that into, that you're able to, and responsibly hold yourself together emotionally, then step that direction. However, start with that slow and tiny stuff, because it can be complicated once we get into those more intricate relationships. Lady at the grocery store, you don't have an emotional involvement. However, you're having an emotional response to her, perhaps, that's probably a little over the top if it really ruins more than just a second of it going, okay, whatever, right? So if we get into the place where we can get to the noun portion of that, accountability, responsibility versus the ing part, what in me wants to challenge that, instead of allowing the noun part over there to just have responsibility for that? Why am I over here still in the actioning part of that, the verbing part of that? Why am I still over here toiling around in that? How can I get to my place of peace and well-being about the activity, the inging that already happened, the verbing that already happened that was unpleasant? How can I get there? And how much of that other person's accountability, responsibility, and willingness to play with me fairly do I need in order to get there? And how fast can I get there with or without it? Because we can't always guarantee that even when we get out of that whole blame and victimization stuff and we're ready to go over and see, okay, that person's accountable for these things, it's more surgical, it's more aloof and less emotionally involved. Even when we get there, we can get triggered right quick to the emotion of, but I need them to apologize to me, or they should. And again, I've said it a lot, and I'll say it probably till the day I drop, that should is just a nasty word that should not be in the dictionary. Should has a lot of implication in it, because it implies already that whomever the author, speaker, writer, whomever it is that is saying should in whatever application it's being said, knows more, has authority, and that's the dictate. In order to be in compliance with whatever I said next, you should do this. And there's already a loss of freedom right there. If I take that in and believe it, that someone says I should apologize to them, I don't know. Do I really need to apologize to them, or do I not? And if I say, you should apologize to me, am I really going to be receiving an apology that is wholehearted and actually heartfelt? Or am I going to be getting someone guilt-tripped into doing what I said because I commanded them to do that on some level? There's a whole lot of trickery in that, and a whole lot of emotional enmeshment with people that don't quite understand. We have to get out of the inging part and get to the noun part, where we're just in the being part. And I will know immediately if someone else is held accountable for something else harmful they've done to me, yes. However, I may not know whether they're willing to play along with how I can most easily resolve that with them. And if I put a whole lot of inging in that and expecting them to come to some sort of a spot, an awakening, an enlightenment of some kind, that they're going to come to my side, they'll understand that you hurt me and I deserve this, and you do, more than likely. Someone harmed you, you definitely do. But are they going to play along with that? And if they aren't willing to do that, we have to get to the human being part of us that can deal with the hurt and the loss and the grief, the shame, any of those ugly things that come up when people don't play nicely. They harm us, and they don't really want to play nicely. And it goes anywhere from a lady in a store being nasty all the way up to people doing horrible things to us. So how much investment and how much time are we going to be actioning words with our mouths and with our intentions and getting someone back for what they did and going in those action places? It's really a good time to get in the noun department and sit down, and get into human being. Let me label this. What am I accountable for? I'm always accountable for me, and I'm always accountable for my actioning and my verbing. I'm always accountable for my activity. So meeting bad activity with more bad activity, what do you think that nets? That nets more bad activity. So that energy that we're putting into it, it's continuing to clash because we're not bringing a fresher understanding of it. And that's why we are here now, is that we've misunderstood for a long time about how it is to be truly empowered and how it is to be truly free and have personal sovereignty. We don't have emotional freedom because there's guilt trips, there's power struggles, there's expectations, there's fear. There's a lot of those inging words, and there's not a whole lot of those nouns that we like to label ourselves as. I am accountable. Nuh-uh, I can blame that person. I'm blaming that person. It's her fault. We like to go in that department because it can really suck a whole lot whenever we haven't acted with the highest integrity ever. It can really be quite a hard inventory to look at ourselves and say, oh, yeah. And even the lady at the grocery store, if she's like that with strangers, she's probably like that with a whole bunch of other people. And that means that her Godzilla suit is all the way out here in a giant suit, that she's willing to be that prickly and that rude to strangers in a store. That means she's probably got, a little God seed potential, whatever you call that little universal nugget of that's probably hidden so far, so deep, etc. And sometimes whenever you chink that, it breaks away, and you see, wow, and just an epic radical transformation. Those I don't see so often. Usually I see that I could sit there trying to chip away at that forever and ever and ever, and it would just keep like hitting it with a toothpick, trying to pop it with a toothpick, a rock or something. That's going to be next to impossible. You need sledgehammers and numerous amounts of them and giant power power tools. I mean, it depends on what the tool is that you're using to try to break the ice with people. However, if I have to start going into that inventory very deep, I'm probably going to get more in the department of responsibility is, yeah, I'm responsible for me, that I'm not going to, snark back at this lady. And her responsibility is that you're rude and you don't hurt my feelings. You're not responsible for that. You're not, and if it does hurt my feelings, somebody else way back in my inventory probably hurt my feelings a whole lot. And I'm so sensitive that I'm going to be Godzilla'd out standing in a store saying those things like that lady, or being hurt because of a lady like that. So the responsibility really hovers back in my direction always with how can I feel so solid and safe in me, and power down on all of the, it's somebody else's fault. It's nobody else's fault anymore. It's me. I'm responsible for me. When I get to that spot, it's always somebody else's accountability for their part of it. However, when I'm talking about just me, my accountability for my mood and me, that's always mine. And that's never going to be anybody else's, not even if I try, no matter how horrible people behave. They can definitely affect our moods, and they do, and they're responsible for doing horrible things sometimes. I'm not denying that. Victimization absolutely does happen. However, you don't get out of that broken cycle by staying in the inging words of not actioning in the right direction. We have to label it correctly and then get out of the labels entirely, where we're going to start calling the person a beast and a monster and all of that stuff. Label who's accountable, who has accountability, who has responsibility outside of me. Once I gain it in me, the out there will really be less and less effective and less bothersome to me. It truly will. And we can go to those people that we have beefs with and say, look, I have a problem with this. Can we talk about this? And if you have someone that's willing to talk to you, is willing to meet you halfway, is willing to come to the table and mediate and not just bring more bad action and bad math, you're bringing bad equation. You're asking me to believe that 2 + 2 equals something besides 4. No matter how loud we scream, no matter how much we cry and moan and try the guilt trip, and all of the power trips that we do, the equation is the equation. If we're not willing to yield somewhere and notice that I am responsible for me and you're responsible for you, and if you're not willing to take your part of that 50-50 junk, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm 100% responsible for my part of it. However, I may not have 50%. If we're warring, I already don't. We already do not have a balanced except 50% of war on both sides if we continue to do that. However, if I'm going to someone and I'm standing in honest integrity and truth and asking them, how may we resolve this? That's already an imbalance. Either somebody else has done more or I've done more, and they deserve my respect and my apology, or I'm asking somebody else for an apology. So there's already a power differential and an imbalance. It's a matter of how we're going to negotiate those power differentials, that we don't become imbalanced in it the other way, or we sit there going back and forth with it, on this. It causes a lot of stress, and it causes absolutely everything that you see now, which is that misunderstanding, breaking down, falling apart, and not realizing that the brink of extinct is here. That old paradigm of how we're going to war and try to reach resolution through conflict, there's no solution in that. There's absolutely no solution in retribution. There isn't any. And so the solution has to be that we all have to pay our debt, whatever it was, whatever nasty we caused. We have to pay that. However, we don't have to take all the labeling after that, all the, he's terrible, she's awful, she's this, she's that, which is that blaming thing. When we're still stuck back there, we're not really into the solution part of it. We're still back here in the retribution, and we've given up on the whole courtroom experience altogether. We've already assumed that I'm Judge Judy, I am the prosecuting attorney, I am the client, I am everything. I'm the victim, I am the jury, and I'm the executioner. I've done it all, and I've already decided, rather than you can definitely say, yeah, that person is definitely accountable. However, when we go at it with a less emotional aspect involved, we can be a little more decisive in that jury phase. Maybe we'll listen, maybe we'll entertain someone's reasons for why they did something. Sometimes it's just, it doesn't matter. I'm going to need to just find a way to reach balance and harmony within me without you being involved, because it was just that egregious. But if we've got something where we can really talk about the conflict and both sides are willing to come at it in that 50-50 understanding of we're going to meet at 50-50 resolution. We don't have, both sides of us do not have 50% accountability. If we did, we'd be at the mediation table taking responsibility and accountability and talking about it like grown-ups instead of warring across the table and making it some sort of a DMZ where we just come and kind of do our hostility in a more polite way. It's ridiculous. And if you don't notice, we have countries around the world that still kind of have that, and should have ended the war. Yeah, shoulda and didn't, because we couldn't reach a balance of how to deal with one another in a non-conflict way. And passive aggressive stuff is conflict. Putting up DMZs is still, it's conflict in a more polite manner. Doing all of these things that are very subversive and seem like we're making progress, we're really not making progress if we're not really sitting down and getting to that phase of, let's get to the part where who's accountable and how do they make this right? And let's leave all the emotions, the judgment, the, jury, executioner, all of it, the judge, the jury, and the executioner, leave that out of individual hands and come to the place in us where, how do I reach balance in me that I don't want to be any of those? I want to just be me. I don't want to be the judge, the jury, the executioner. I just want to be little old me who deserves to have balance and justice brought to me. I do. And know that there are people that they're not going to give it to you. They're absolutely not going to give it to you because they're in worse shape than you. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it in the first place. There are many people that are out there and they're like that. However, it doesn't help the cycle to break or get any better when we take up arms and decide, well, I'm gonna fix this on my own. When we go rogue element, that's when you start messing in areas where, yeah, you're creating imbalances in places where it's keeping you stuck in that cycle over there as much as it's keeping them over there in that cycle. And both of you have justifications for why there's a war. Everybody has a justification and a reason for why there's a war. It's a matter of who's going to have the guts, the glory, the honor, the integrity, the honesty, the something to come in as the peaceful negotiator and bring resolution. And if the peaceful negotiator is going to get shot in the resolution, then that's just no, there's no DMZ here. That's a border that, no, you will not cross that. You're not welcome here. And when we can't do that emotionally without truly gunning up and using violence for real, then you have this state of existence that we live in, which is quite hostile and can be very scary. And people are triggered all over the place with those deep core things that leave little old ladies saying terrible things in grocery stores. And you see it all over. And for some reason, it trends all over social media about people losing their beans, and others just find that hilarious. That's predatorial. It's apex stuff, that just kind of, it causes me to feel a little bit of sickness sometimes, that ew, and I don't like it. However, I understand the psychology of it, but it always will boil back to me that why would I, find that hilarious? Why would I want to enjoy someone else popping off and going weird? Why would I want to push someone or poke the bear? What in me desires to see somebody else lose control? Because that's a sense of control where we enjoy watching somebody else lose control, because that means, well, I would never do that usually when we're enjoying that kind of activity. So those are the kinds of questions that are well worth asking about what in my emotions can help me be more surgical in my assessment. You can't bring emotions into the assessment right off the top. You just can't. When you look at something and you're already emotionally charged, you're not going to get a fair assessment more than likely. And then when you gang up with a whole bunch of witnesses to the crime and they've all seen something different, but they're willing to go with your story because this is just a feast, it turns into the apex predator games, and here we are. So I hope that that's made some sense, and I hope that you can take whatever is in there and use whatever portion of it that is usable to you, and anything that isn't, leave it where it is. So take care of yourselves and enjoy your day, whatever part of the day you're in. And remember, get within your skin, because you're divine. It really is truly, truly, truly fine. And it will help you the more you reach in there and find that little nugget of joy, that nugget of universal goodness, that nugget of delight, the cosmic juices of yum yum. When you get in there, that is what can truly help you find that balance and settle out the emotions before you start looking at the assessment of becoming the judge, the jury, the executioner, etc. It keeps us out of the whole dynamic entirely and puts us more into the casual observer. So take care of yourselves again. Be well and enjoy your day, whatever part of the day you're in. Take care, friends. Bye-bye.